Good day, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about my rocket report, which was made by me, Vitor Ferreira. First, let's talk about my question that I used in my experiment. In this case, the initial question I used in this experiment was, will a reduction on the size of the rocket's fins cause the rocket to fly further? So now let's talk about my hypothesis. So my formalized hypothesis is, if the distance flown by the rocket is related to the size of the fins, then as the size of the fins decreases, the distance flown by the rocket increases. So now let's talk about some observations I made. This will include several graphs, pictures, and tables. Okay, so as you can see, in the first launch, the control rocket flew more than my rocket. My rocket flew 23.52 meters, and the control rocket flew 27.67. But in this case, I think this happened because the first day was very windy, and my rocket would fly less because it's lighter, because I reduced the size of the fins compared to the control rocket. Now on the second day, since it wasn't windy, it was sunny, my rocket flew more. That's because it was lighter and it doesn't have any wind, and the aerodynamics are better. Now on the third day, my rocket flew more again because it wasn't windy. On this case, it wasn't sunny, it was pretty cloudy, but there was completely no wind. Now, as you can see in the average I made, my rocket flew more because for most of the time it wasn't windy. But when it was windy, my rocket didn't fly enough. So, in this case, my rocket flew more than the control rocket, as you can see in the average. Okay, so I'm going to show you now a new graph which compares the same data as the last graph. So you can see in the first day, my rocket, which is in blue, flies less than the control rocket, which is displayed in red. On the second day, it flies more, my rocket flies more. On the third day, my rocket flies more again, and on the averages, my rocket surpasses the control rocket. Now I'm going to show you a table that compares the weight, the hypotenuse, and the legs. My rocket weighs 44 grams and the control rocket weighs 72 grams. My hypotenuse weighs 14.5 centimeters and the control rocket weighs 29 centimeters. Now the legs weigh 10 centimeters, 0.75, and the control rocket measures 21.5 centimeters. My weight is less because I reduced the size of the fins. Now I'm going to talk about my conclusion of this project. In this case, my conclusion is going to be divided into 8 parts, so let's see those parts. What did you do in this experiment? Was my question answered? Was my hypothesis right? Were there any errors in this experiment? How will I prevent these errors in the future? What did I learn? What will you do in the future? And can I make a new question? Okay, so in this experiment, I created a rocket which I thought would fly more than a control rocket. To do that, I had to change one thing in this rocket. What I changed was the size of the fin. I made my fin 2 times smaller. I used a launcher made out of pipes to launch the rocket into the air. To pump that launcher, I used a hand pump. Now I'm going to analyze if my question was answered. So my question was, will a reduction on the size of the rocket fins cause the rocket to fly further? Yes, that question was answered because, as you can see in my data, the rocket flew further because of the reduction in the rocket's fins. Mr. Cesar. So today I'm going to talk about if my hypothesis was right. In this case, I believe my hypothesis was right because in this case, my rocket flew more than the control rocket because I reduced the size of the fins. Now, in the first day, it didn't fly more because of the wind, but in the other 2 days, it did fly more. Hello, Mr. Cesar. So I'm going to talk about if there were any errors in this experiment. I believe there were several errors in this experiment. For example, the weather, which should be a control variable, varied during this experiment. Now, another error was probably the way that Mr. Cesar flipped the switch when we were launching our rockets. Now, another error was maybe when we were pumping our rockets, we pumped a little bit less than needed or a little bit more. That could be some errors that could have happened in this experiment. There you go. Okay. So, let's talk about how I will prevent these errors in the future. So in this case, I think I will prevent these errors by creating my own pump which releases the exact amount of air every single time. Now, another time, I can create a switch which doesn't need the time to pull down before you launch the rocket. So I can press a button, for example, and it will launch the rocket, and it will be the same every single time instead of just turning a lever. Now, I'm going to talk about my last error, which will be I will do this experiment inside a big giant gym or somewhere where there's no wind or weather that could affect this experiment, so we can actually see if the rocket is actually flying properly. Okay, so what did I learn in this experiment? So what I learned in this experiment was that you can create a simple rocket by using simple materials. I also learned that if you reduce the size of the fins, you will get a better result if the weather is favorable. I also learned that you can create a rocket launcher just like Mr. Caesar did using simple pipes. And I also learned that you can create simple graphs and tables to display awesome data. So what will I do in the future? In the future, I will find a place where the weather can't affect the experiment. I will also make a switch for the launcher which does not affect the way the rocket will fly. I will also make an exact pump that will release an exact amount of air every single time, and that's it. That is what I will do in the future to improve this experiment. So a new question I would make was, what if I can add something else in this experiment other than the size of the fin? So I can change the size of the fin, but what if I can change something else, like adding a new fin? So my question is, what will happen if I decrease the size of the fin and even more add a new fin? That's my new question.